Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 1054 for April 28, 2024. Coming up in a few minutes.
I never really go into the blending process with kind of a preconceived target point, a preconceived target profile. I really kind of follow it, and I'm effectively just trying to make the best blend that I can make with what I have available.
Dixon Dedman is in his second act in the whiskey business. The owner of Kentucky's legendary Beaumont Inn founded Two Times Oak Bourbon a couple of years ago after selling his family's Kentucky Owl Bourbon brand. He's out with a new release in the brand's Icon series, the Kiawah Blend, and he'll join us on this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth. That's just ahead, along with the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
Hey everyone, it's me, Gabriel Cardarello with yours, and I'm here to introduce you to something very special. We've gone and blended the time-honored whiskey craftsmanship of Scotland with the whiskey-making finesse of Japan. And let me tell you, it's something truly remarkable. More on that in a minute.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Small batch. How would you describe it? It's like an Irishman's understanding of baseball. Extremely limited.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. Pernod Ricard reported disappointing sales figures for the first 3 months of 2024 as economic headwinds in the U.S. and China continue to keep whiskey sales down. Net sales were flat for the quarter compared to analyst projections for almost 3% growth. U.S. sales were off by 11%, while sales in China were down 12% from a year ago. Meanwhile, Bruichladdich and Westland whiskey owner Remy Cointreau reported stronger than expected fourth-quarter sales, largely on improved sales of its cognacs. Its sales during the quarter were down just 0.7% against analyst expectations of a 3.5% drop. The figures are being seen as a potential for a speedier return to growth. Inchdarney founder Ian Palmer is stepping down as managing director a year before the distillery releases its first single malt Scotch whiskey. Palmer was behind the creation of Rye Law, a Scottish rye whiskey. He'll be succeeded by current master distiller Scott Snedden, and we wish Ian well. We have a lot of new whiskeys to talk about this week. WhistlePig has released one of the oldest North American single malts on record. It's a 25-year-old single malt named the Badonkadonk, and while the distillery has not been named publicly, we're pretty sure it comes from Glenora Distillery in Nova Scotia, which was the same distillery that produced last year's 21-year-old WhistlePig single malt, the Beholden. The Badonkadonk was finished for 5 years in Cabernet Sauvignon wine casks and will sell for $2,000 a bottle. It'll be an annual release just like the Beholden, which has its second annual release out now at $900 a bottle. The Last Drop Distillers has released its 2024 collection of spirits, including a 55-year-old Tomintoul single malt and a 40-year-old single malt from Auchentoshan. There's also a 22-year-old Infinity blend of rums from different distilleries. I received samples this week, and we'll have more on this next time around. Lux Row Distillers has released the latest edition of Blood Oath. Packed number 10 is master blender John Rempe's latest creation. It's finished in a combination of Cabernet Franc and Merlot wine casks and will carry a recommended retail price of $129.99 a bottle. Oregon's Westward Whiskey is releasing its second Whiskey Club offering of the year. The Vintner's Cuvée is blended from whiskeys matured in Syrah, Cabernet Sauvignon, Tempranillo, and Pinot Noir casks. It's available exclusively to Westward Whiskey Club members for $99.95 a bottle. Ireland's Two Stacks whiskey is coming out with a new annual release. The Pillars of Creation whiskey blends together single casks from Dingle, Ecklandville, and Killowen distilleries and finishes the blend in a cream sherry butt. It's available in 700 ml bottles and the signature Two Stacks Dram in a Can from the Two Stacks website. Also from Ireland, Waterford Whiskey has released its flagship single malt, the Cuvée Coffee, named for French artist Nathaniel Coffey, who designed the label. It's the oldest Waterford yet, with all of the single farm origin whiskies used in the blend at least 6 years old. It'll be available in select U.S. markets along with Ireland, Europe, and online. And finally, Buffalo Trace Distillery is opening up its first visitors center outside of the U.S., Buffalo Trace Distillery, London. It's located in the heart of Covent Garden and will open for tours on May 6th. We'll have more on this next time around. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's check the calendar now and see what's happening in the world of whiskey. A few seats are still available for Bourbon's Bistro's annual Kentucky Derby handicapping dinner Tuesday night in Louisville. The Spirit of Speyside Festival gets underway on Wednesday and runs through next Monday. The Spirit of Toronto Festival is this coming Saturday night at Toronto's Roy Thompson Hall. Whiskey and Barrel Night is May 9th in New York City, and Whiskey Live Dublin is May 17th and 18th in Dublin. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Kentucky and Ireland have plenty in common. Two homes of horse racing. Bluegrass music is said to have Irish roots. Okay, it's not the longest list, but the Redbreast Kentucky Oak Edition only strengthens the bond. Finished in sustainably sourced Kentucky oak for a captivating nose and round taste. I see a triple crown in this thoroughbred's future.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock and the Classic Malts lineup. Dixon Dedman's family history in the whiskey business goes back more than 100 years. He's an innkeeper as well as a whiskey blender, and Two Times Oak is his second act in the whiskey business after reviving the family's Kentucky Owl Bourbon brand. He's just released the latest edition in the Two Times Oak Icon series, the Kiawah Blend, named for Kiawah Island in South Carolina, and Dixon joined me on a Zoom call the other day. First of all, let's talk about the new Kiawah Blend. This one is unusual in that it's a double-barreled high rye blend, right?
Not unusual in terms of the other four. I mean, they all have had that high rye double barrel component in them. So you know, it's I've been working with that same those same high rye barrels and double barreling those high ryes throughout the entire Icon series. The ratios of the different components change. And, you know, what I think is, it seems to be very interesting, the response, for whatever reason, I settled on a much higher composition of the number 4 charred double barrel liquid, that high rye. And so, you know, this is a much kind of richer, sweeter, much more forward on the palate, which I guess seems to agree with a lot of people, but still the same program across the 4 icons.
What's your philosophy when you start putting a blend together?
I honestly, you know, I'm not sure if it's because I'm just not smart enough to do it any other way. You know, my philosophy is effectively to take a fresh look at what I have available, the samples I have available. I pull a lot of samples and kind of evaluate each different component. And then, when one strikes me as really extraordinary or something that really stands out, I basically use that as kind of the base to build from. But for all intents and purposes, I never really go into the blending process with kind of a preconceived target point, a preconceived target profile. I really kind of follow it, and I'm effectively just trying to make the best blend that I can make with what I have available. And I find myself getting to a place where I think I've nailed it, and I usually try 3 or 4 more things that end up proving the fact that I should have stopped when I thought I should have stopped, and that's usually what ends up making it into the blend.
How did you develop your blending skills? I know that you've run the family inn, the Beaufort Inn or Beaumont Inn for years. How did you develop your blending skills?
I think there's probably a couple of different, couple different parts to that. One is when I was in the hospitality business, in the inn business, I started leading a lot of tastings. I was leading tastings, 5, 6, 7 times a week with different groups that were in and people. And what I really found was that talking to people more about where it lands on the palate, where you feel it, and using that to describe it was a much simpler way to talk to people about tasting whiskey than it was specific tasting notes or whatever. So I really kind of leaned into this idea of, you register, sweet registers on the front of the palate, savory middle of the palate, spice on the back of the palate, sour and bitter and acid on the sides of the palate. And leaning into that and discussing whiskeys with people, talking about how wheated bourbons get their profile from the barrel and thus they're sweeter and will be recognized on the front of the palate, and higher rye bourbons with the spice. And so I think, I really kind of, that was kind of initially how I started to understand at least the way I taste, and then the way that, what I leaned into in blending. It wasn't as much about writing down booklets of tasting notes, but really about the feel, and do I like the feel, and is it a pleasant feel, and is there movement across the palate, or is it one dimensional on the palate, and that type of thing. And then there's no doubt that being kind of from Kentucky and central Kentucky, and having some relationships with people in the industry that were willing to allow me to pick their brain and to discuss. Jim Rutledge was kind of my mentor. He was has always been very special to me, and somebody that really helped me and helped me understand, the nuance of blending. As you said, I come from this kind of food and restaurant background where if you're making a sauce and you want it to be spicier, you add more pepper. And it was a real kind of eye-opening experience when you realize that you're making a blend of barrels of bourbon, and you think adding some more of this spicy component should, in fact, make it spicier, and all it does is make it become sweeter. And so it was, I think, kind of both tasting a lot and really developing, my concepts, and then really being able to spend time with with people like Jimmy Rutledge, Jimmy Russell, Eddie Russell, even Mr. Van Winkle has been fantastic to me. Having the access to these very successful, individuals has certainly, helped.
What's the best lesson Jimmy Russell taught you?
Jimmy Russell?
Yeah.
Jimmy Russell's message to me one time, we were listening to somebody talk about all their different whiskeys and all these different tasting notes and all these obscure components. And Jimmy leaned over to me and said, "I don't know about you, Dixon, but we don't put any of that stuff in our whiskey." And that, I took that on a lot of levels, but basically to mean, Jimmy says, "I just want to make I just want to make whiskey that tastes good, that people enjoy drinking, and that's certainly something I'll always remember from Mr. Russell.
Let's talk about the Two Times Oak blends and the various lines that you have. You have the everyday offering, the Oak series, the Icon series, and then your Gem of Kentucky single barrels, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How do you decide whether to bottle something as a single barrel for that Gem of Kentucky series or blend it off?
You know what I think are fun about the Gem of Kentucky, and I mean no disrespect to other single barrels, but traditionally I think single barrel oftentimes is used as a more of a marketing term than anything. A lot of brands that are or products that are bottled as a single barrel are, yes, bottled individually, but it's only because they match the profile of every single barrel that they release in that program. There are not very many single barrels out there where you have nuance from barrel to barrel. And I think that's what's exciting to me about the Gem of Kentucky is that I select these barrels because I really love these barrels, not because they're on profile, not because one matches the other. And I actually like that variance. I like that variable. I like that the different play in the different barrels. And I think, I've seen, I was seeing a guy sent me a picture the other night. He's collected 12 of them, and he's got, 3 that are his all-time favorites and 3 that, are a little bit, that's what I really enjoy, is I grab one, I taste one, I say, oh, wow, this one needs to go solo.
Let's talk for a moment about your history, because your family history goes back a long way in the whiskey business, doesn't it?
It does, yes, sir. Well, and there was a bit of a gap there, but there is some history back there.
Your great-great-grandfather, C.M. Dedman. Let's talk about him.
C.M. Dedman, was a very interesting, story because he was orphaned at the age of 6. He was 6 years old when both his parents passed away, and he and his sister were adopted by his uncle, who's named Judge William McBrayer. And Judge McBrayer was the effectively county judge executive in Anderson County, but also over the course of his time, and at one point owned 3 distilleries at the same time, one of which was the Cedar Brook Distillery, which was kind of his flagship brand. And so C.M. Dedman was a pharmacist by trade. He owned we have his diploma. I believe he graduated from Northwestern University with a degree in pharmacology, or whatever that is. But so he was effectively gifted the funds to buy and establish his own distillery when he was married in 1879. So in 1879, he got married and he bought a piece of land right on the Kentucky River in North Mercer County called Oregon Landing, which is supposedly where Daniel Boone and James Harrod crossed the Kentucky River to come in and found Harrodsburg, which is the first permanent settlement west of the Allegheny Mountains. So he settled right there, about 25 acres, and built a small distillery that was operational by 1879. And I believe he was doing a lot of contract distilling for other brands, as well as establishing his own brand, which was Kentucky Owl.
And you revived that brand back in 2014, and you're no longer associated with it, but tell us about reviving that brand.
To be 100% honest, it was this family dream. My family still owns the property where that distillery was. In the very early 90s, one of my dad's sisters was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so as a family, we built a cabin on the foundation of one of those warehouses. We grew up spending the night down there, family gatherings, celebrated every July 4th, my grandmother's birthday down there. And it was always this dream to one day do that. Now, at this point, we are very entrenched in the hospitality industry. My grandfather and father were the third and fourth generation running the Beaumont Inn. And my grandfather's famous line, I've told this a million times, but he always said that when he won the lottery, it wasn't going to be if, it was when he won the lottery. The first thing he was going to do was buy a limousine. And the second thing he was going to do was to resurrect Kentucky Owl. And unfortunately, he passed away in 2003, just before his numbers would have come in, I assume. But, you know, it was, and I think I've always kind of been wired in a certain way that if, it only takes a few people to tell me something's too hard or it's not possible or you can't do it to make me say, oh, yeah, watch this. And so I was kind of kicking the tires on that. And what I kept running into was the complications that come on the legal side of things, the red tape, the paperwork, that type of stuff. And of course, I was still, all in on the hospitality business, and it's really hard to figure out how to to navigate the TTB while you're also the head dishwasher and busboy at your restaurant. So that's when I connected with an old family friend of ours who essentially said, I'm also in the wine business. I make custom wines for people all the time. My team has the capability to do all of that side of the business from that perspective, if you can take care of the bourbon side of things. And I said, well, I've got the bourbon side of things covered. And so, we launched with no plan. I tell people all the time, I mean, I really thought that worst case scenario, I was going to have a bunch of bourbon that I like to pour at my kid's wedding one day if nobody ever bought the stuff. But it was, I would say, one of, if not the proudest moments of my professional career, outside of, or right up there with accepting a James Beard Award for, our family's history in hospitality in the restaurant business. When I, was able to create that blend and take it to a distributor, and the distributor said, I'll take this and as much of it as you can send me. And this is fantastic. We're very excited. And that was great. The call to Mark, my partner, was great. But to be able to go back to my father and he was mowing grass. We were talking about this the other day. He was mowing grass and I walked back. I was in a suit. And he said, today was the day, right? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, did you do it? I said, I did it. And he said, so Kentucky Owl's back. And I said, yes, sir, it is. And we both got a little misty-eyed and emotional. And there were a few pours left in the sample bottle that I had taken to the distributor. And we went and sat on the front porch of the inn and polished that off almost in complete silence. But I think it was a very special moment for us, for my father and I, for my family. So it was very, very emotional.
Do you regret giving up control of the brand?
I don't one bit. I think there are, two parts of that. One part is that, we reached a point where to take the brand a step further and to explore distribution outside of Kentucky and increase the volume of the brand. We had to have either a bigger vehicle or an infusion of cash. So, that was a kind of, it was almost, we were in a kind of a glass ceiling situation. But the other thing is that, I was able to stay involved and in control for long enough to really gain a great understanding of the industry and how the big machinery in the industry works. I don't feel like I lost control of that brand until 3 or 4 years after my new relationship with the Stoli Group, and I'm not bitter. We left on great terms. We just had different visions, and I think I accomplished probably all that I could have accomplished in that role. And it was time for me to take what I had learned and take, some new ideas to do something else. So I've never regretted for a second, the path that I was on, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity and what we accomplished. I just, it's kind of, a point where I thought, hey, I'm ready to take all of these lessons, successes and failures, and try to go, do something on my own again.
Give me a sense of what success looks like for Two Times Oak 5 years from now.
Well, I don't know that they're quite old enough. But I tell people all the time that my dream for Two Times Oak is that one day they take my name off the front of that bottle and it's one of my children's in place of that. I grew up in a family business. I grew up in a generational business. I grew up in a business where you grow up and you hand it down, and that's the dream for me. I don't, we have no delusions. I have no delusions, nor do I have any desire to be in the competitive space of the million case brands. I think, we're attracting this great consumer that appreciates, that kind of added quality and craft of 2XO. And so the beauty of what I have in my relationship with Prestige Beverage Group is that, I'm not aligned with these investors who are just saying you got to get to this number of cases so that you can get to this valuation so that we can sell it off. My partnership with Prestige is a long time, and it's a slow grow to just, build a brand, not build a company that can be, sold for some of these monopoly money figures that are coming out of this industry right now. So, I think 5 years from now, if we're tracking where we're tracking and building, building awareness of the brand and fans of the brand and people who are, committed to and are making a personal connection with the brand and what's being created, that's success for me.
Thanks to Dixon Dedman for joining us on this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. Let's start off the What I'm Tasting This Week department with the 2 Times Oak Kiawah Blend. It's bottled at 52% ABV, and the nose is full of caramel, honey, peaches, and apple pie. The taste starts off with cherry cola at first, then black pepper and clove notes come alive, with hints of honey, peaches, and caramel candy in the background. The finish? It's long, dry, and astringent with lingering spices. I'm scoring the 2 Times Oak Kiawah Blend a 93. Now, let's look at the 2024 release of Michter's 10-year-old bourbon. This one is bottled at 47.2% ABV. The nose has touches of caramel, oak tannins, dried fruits, and a hint of leather. The taste has notes of cherries, black pepper, honey, dried fruits, and a touch of oak tannins. The finish? Long, dry, and peppery. I'm scoring the 2024 release of Michter's 10-year-old bourbon a 93. Let's wrap up now with the Keeper's Heart 10-year-old Irish single malt from O'Shaughnessy Distilling in Minneapolis. This whiskey originally came from Cooley Distillery and is finished in Malaga wine casks. The nose is malty with touches of apricots, honey, and almond oil. The taste has notes of barley sugar, honey, dried fruits, and a hint of almonds, while the finish is long with hints of toasted oak and barley sugar. I'm scoring the Keeper's Heart 10-year-old Irish single malt a 92, and Keeper's Heart master distiller Brian Nation will be my guest on next week's WhiskyCast. I'll be adding these whiskeys to our searchable list of tasting notes for nearly 3,700 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com.
Dewar's has truly been innovative in perfecting cask finishing, which has led to exceptional expressions of our craftsmanship. This extra step allows our whiskey to further mature in carefully selected casks and marks the final stage of our double aging process, or in Dewar's case, our double aging method, resulting in unique, indulgent tasting experiences. The new Dewar's Double 21-year Mizunara oak cask finish undergoes a meticulous 4-stage aging process, including being finished in sought-after Japanese Mizunara oak casks. Crafting these casks is challenging due to the non-straight growth of Mizunara oak, and it takes 200 years for these trees to reach full potential. The result, a masterfully balanced whiskey with notes of sandalwood, coconut, and creamy vanilla, to name a few. And while it's not the easiest to find, it's an unmissable experience.
Let's open up the WhiskyCast community app and see what people are talking about this week. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey. Mr. Pie posted a photo of a bottle of Howler Head banana-flavored Kentucky Spirit the other day with the simple words, "I seek forgiveness." There's no need to seek forgiveness. Everyone's entitled to experiment with different whiskeys from time to time, such as the experiment Tyrone Cote posted. Just enjoyed a Laphroaig 25 and then, without washing out the glass, poured a shot of Glenfarclas 21 to get a slightly smoky Glenfarclas. That must have been interesting. Never seen a smoky Glenfarclas before, or even a variation on one like this. I'm going to have to try that out sometime. Tom, the Tracer Bullet, posted that he caught up with Ardbeg's Masters of Smoke tour in what he described as quite a tricked-out Airstream. He shared several photos of that trailer. The tour is making its way up and down the U.S. East Coast this month. If you have something else you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, download the WhiskyCast community app and join the conversation. It's free to download from the iOS and Google Play app stores, and you can also find us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com.
100 individual farms of Irish barley, separately harvested, malted, fermented, distilled and matured. Is that too much effort? Perhaps. Unless you're interested in flavour above all else. Waterford Whiskey, the most naturally flavoursome single malt.
Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Balcones Distilling. It's worth explaining once in a while how casks make it around the world from Kentucky to other distilleries. Each distillery has its own method for selling off used barrels, but most go through a cask broker who deals with distillery owners in Scotland, Ireland, and other countries. In some cases, barrels are shipped to their new owners intact, but there's a thriving business in Kentucky in breaking down barrels so that they can be shipped in pieces and reassembled at a cooperage in Scotland or elsewhere. That way they can fit a lot more barrels into a shipping container. The demand for ex-bourbon barrels has grown, and so has the price. 10 years ago, you could get barrels in bulk for around $50 a piece. Now you're looking at $200 a barrel, depending on the distillery. If there's something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Balcones Distilling, the original Texas whiskey, at the forefront of the American single malt movement, exploring place and provenance with unique style whiskeys, ranging from the award-winning Texas One and Lineage American single malts to their Baby Blue straight corn whiskey and Texas Rye bottled in bond. Discover whiskey from a new perspective at balconesdistilling.com. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of all of our past episodes that goes all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the WhiskyCast community app. Download it today from the Apple and Google App Stores. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever go out drinking with a peacock? Always the same. Few too many, tail feathers come out, drinks get knocked over, bartender's not happy, night's over before it started. All I'm saying is, don't be the peacock in your group.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Dewar's Double 21-year-old Mizunara Oak Cask Finish is like a worldly whiskey adventure you simply can't miss. Courtesy of your friends at Dewar's. Savor it responsibly. Copyright 2024, Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 46% alcohol by volume.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2024, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.